John, thanks again for joining me for the first investor stream of 2020. Myanmar Metals announced the results of its expansion study on Friday. Can you tell us what this means for the Baldwin Project?
Yes, and Happy New Year to you, Alex. It's been a while coming, actually. The expansion study began as an underground study last year, and that work showed us that while underground mining is viable, open pit mining, at least to the bottom of the old workings, is a better bet. The study shows that following the starter pit, which listeners will recall produces 25 million tonnes of plant feed, there can be two more phases of open pit mining, reaching an ultimate depth of 365 metres below the valley floor. So that's still about 40 metres above the bottom of the old workings. And for us, it means that we can at last demonstrate world-scale production from our world-class resource. So no longer is Baldwin a 25 million tonne starter pit, consuming 1/4 of a 100 million tonne deposit. It's now a series of pits taking well more than half, and with the ore body still open in all directions. And that means an increase in mine life beyond the published life of the starter pit, much higher total production, and the ability to increase the size of the processing plant. And it also supports our request for a 50-year lease term, and that's already been lodged with the Myanmar government.
So, John, if I'm understanding this correctly, Baldwin is now going to be a starter pit, followed by two cutbacks before you move on to mine the newly discovered lodes on the site. The amount of waste mining required looks to be quite high. Can you comment on that?
Well, yes, you are correct. There is only a single cross-section presented in the announcement, and it's always a bit hard to judge a mine from a single section. But you can clearly see the three phases of mining being the starter pit. That's phase one, that builds the life of mine infrastructure and sets up the fleet. And then phase two, that's a cutback. And in production terms, it's about 2/3 the size of the starter pit. And then finally, another cutback, phase three, and that yields a similar plant feed inventory to the initial starter pit. So they're quite substantial, all of them. All told, it's several decades of mining and mineral processing, and there is a reasonable amount of waste to move, but it's interesting to note that the final overall stripping ratio for the completion of all three phases is almost identical to the stripping ratio published in the pre-feasibility study for the starter pit, so it's actually quite a good outcome. And we have, of course, foreshadowed the larger mine footprint with our final site layout that was reported in December. It has a central haul road leaving the pit, with waste trucks turning to the right to the waste dump and ore trucks turning left to the ROM pad. The plant located near the water supply, and a dedicated private access road down the valley to Namtu.
Thanks, John. You've also flagged a change in plant size in that announcement. Can you shed some more light on this and what's involved exactly?
Well, this is a really exciting consequence of having multiple open pit stages producing much more plant feed than was originally considered. Now we have some certainty on the longer term production capability of the mine. We've been able to select a more appropriate plant size. So we will be taking a 3 million tonne per annum plant into the definitive feasibility study. In terms of capital equipment, it's a very modest increase. A larger mill size, extra float capacity, larger filter press and some pumps need to be increased in capacity, but otherwise the equipment we've already spec'd and priced is fit for purpose, and of course the flow sheet doesn't change. And in terms of operation, we need to allow for larger volumes throughout the process flow. So ore and waste are mined faster, which means larger trucks and a larger ROM pad. The tailings storage needs to be provided at a faster rate. And of course, concentrate is also produced, shipped and sold at a considerably higher rate, bringing revenue forward, which is always a good thing. Now, we're yet to run the financials, of course. This will be done during the DFS, but I think a plant of 3 million tonnes per annum capacity is a better fit for a world-class ore body like Baldwin. For example, it puts us on the same page as the Cannington plant in Queensland.
Now, if I could just change the subject slightly, John. We spoke last year about the company's share price faltering in 2019, and it now seems to be recovering now that the Milo listed options have been closed off. What did the final numbers look like?
We're pleased to have completed the listed option exercise and share allotment process, and I think investors are pleased to see the overhang in the market gone and the end to the fire sale of free options that we saw in the dying days of 2019. I'm happy to report that 95% of all options were exercised, and that's a total of $174.8 million, raising $5.25 million for the company. Only $10 million lapsed, and we suspect that this is due in large part to holders just not being aware of their options, despite our notice to holders. We're pleased to receive those funds, and of course it strengthens our financial position for the year ahead.
And finally, John, we're in the first week of 2020. What's in store over the next few months?
Well, Well, 2020 is our biggest year, as I've been saying for some time. So it starts with exploration at ER Valley. We're onto the site prep now, and we'll mobilise 2 rigs there this month, aiming to follow up the 5.5% copper intersection in the discovery hole last year, and we'll have results later in the quarter, so that's something to look forward to. But also in this quarter, we will finish our contract discussions with the Mines Department. We'll lodge our MIC permit application, and as I've mentioned before, this is the head permit, allows the project to go ahead. Around the same time, we'll complete the DFS, and once the MIC permit's issued, the study is at that point truly bankable and it can be publicly announced. Somewhere around mid-year, we'll draw our finance and offtake discussions to a close, and I'm planning to commence construction in the second half of the year. So I'd like to see a ribbon-cutting ceremony at the start of the access road, perhaps in September or October, and that will have us on track for mining in 2021 and mill production in 2022. So it's all go. We've jumped straight back into it after New Year.
Well, thanks for your time, John, and all the best for 2020.
Thanks, Alex.